Okay, I think we have hit our quorum. I'm going to do a quick roll call of our commissioners. If I miss your name, please let me know. Okay, so we have Commissioner Burris, I believe by phone, Commissioner Etherton, Commissioner McCall, Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner Cornwell, Commissioner Gillis, Commissioner Huffer, Commissioner Bunker, and it looks like Commissioner Richards just joined as well. Is there anyone that I missed?
Catherine McCall at DNR. Sorry, I was having IT issues.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Nina, I see your message. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chair Bunker.
Thanks. So welcome everybody to the April the 8th program committee meeting. So we've done our quorum call, so we're good for that. The next item on the agenda is the minutes from the last meeting. We need, does anybody have questions or comments about the minutes from the last meeting? If not, then we need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Commissioner Gillis, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner. For a second.
Commissioner Wilson will second.
Thanks, Dave. Once again, any questions or comments about the minutes? All those in favor of approving the last minutes, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Good. So we have, on the agenda, we have 3 refinements and 1 informational only item. Let's start off with the town of Churchill, their comprehensive review of their critical areas plan.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Thank you. Give me 1 second. All right. And is that showing up okay for everybody? Thanks. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Maggie White. I'm one of the planners here, and I will be presenting the Town of Churchill's comprehensive review for you all today. I have on the call with me Karen Ruff and Sarah Franklin to answer any questions on behalf of the town. The Town of Churchill is located in Queen Anne's County and is shown by that little red dot on the left-hand map here. The Town of Churchill is located along the Southeast Creek, a tributary of the Chester River. The town encompasses all 3 critical area land designations, IDA, LDA, and RCA. The town's 1,000-foot critical area boundary map update was approved by the Critical Area Commission on August 2nd, 2017. Here you can see the town outlined by that thicker black line on this map. And our natural resource article requires each local jurisdiction to comprehensively review and update its local critical area program at least every 10 years to ensure conformance with the requirements of the critical area law, criteria, and regulations. The town first adopted its critical area program in 1989 and has not completed a comprehensive review update since then. The comprehensive review being brought forward today was based largely on the Critical Area Commission's model ordinance for towns and municipalities. Because the comprehensive update to the Town of Churchill's critical area program meets the goals of the critical area law and standards for comprehensive review, Commission staff recommend that the Commission concur with the Chair's determination that this comprehensive review be processed as a refinement. Further, staff recommend the Chair approve this refinement with the following condition. With 180 days of the date of the Commission's approval, the Town of Churchill shall incorporate the recommended text edits described in attachment 2 of the staff reports provided. And with that, that is really about it for this comprehensive review. And I will turn over the floor for any questions or comments.
Any questions or comments about the Churchill comprehensive review of the critical use plan? None? I guess you did a good job. Anyway, so I guess we move on to a motion to approve the recommendation. The motion will be concurrence with the chair's determination of refinement and approval of the plan with conditions.
Commissioner Wilson make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Commissioner Richards?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Once again, any questions or comments about the comprehensive review? Hearing none, let's go on to the vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Great, thank you. Motion's approved. So the second item on the agenda is another refinement. So St. Mary's County text amendment concerning new RCA uses, non-medical daycare.
All right, thank you, Chair Bunker. Let me get settled here. You should all see my screen. So good afternoon. Today, I will be presenting the St. Mary's County's text amendment to allow for non-medical daycares as an approved use within the RCA for a vote. I'm joined today by staff from St. Mary's County that can help me answer any questions the committee may have. Some of you may recall that this text amendment was presented to the program committee back in December of last year for a vote. The text amendment was returned to the county to address concerns of the program committee. Today, the county has addressed those concerns, and I'm presenting the updated language for a new vote. So just to review, the county is proposing to amend the St. Mary's County Code to allow for non-medical daycares in the RCA. This is being proposed to achieve two primary goals. The first is to allow nursery schools and preschools to operate within the RCA, expanding access to early childhood education and care services in areas where such opportunities are currently limited. Second, the proposed use seeks to address equity gaps in rural communities, which are frequently located within the RCA and often lack nearby educational and child care options. So this text amendment was brought before the committee in December for a vote. The committee and later the full commission voted to concur with the chair's determination to review the amendment as a refinement and recommended that the chair return the text amendment to the county to address the following concerns. First, a limit to lot coverage with a limited exceedance allowed for small lots. The limited exceedance is to allow for necessary improvements required by other state permitting agencies to support early childhood education facilities, such as parking and playground facilities. The second was to prohibit the use of a variance to exceed the lot coverage limit for this use. And the third was in the maximum occupancy language to include the relevant permitting agencies that establish the maximum occupancy associated with the respective use. The chair took the recommendation from the commission as his final decision and returned the text amendment to the county for revisions. On March 10th, 2026, St. Mary's County adopted ordinance number 2026-05, which includes 4 additional limited standards. The first restricts the use of buildings existing restricts the use to existing buildings as of October 14th, 2025. I want to address that the staff report and the original ordinance did not include this vesting date of October 14th. Since the staff report was distributed, the county has submitted an approved ordinance with that vesting date included. The second limited standard limits the attendance to no more than 42 individuals, or the maximum permitted based as determined by the Maryland Department of Health for adult daycares and the Maryland Department of Education for early childhood education facilities. The third limits lot coverage to 15% or the existing non-conforming lot coverage for properties less than 50,000 square feet. 3.5% exceedance is allowed to support the use. And finally, the final standard prohibits variance requests to exceed the lot coverage limit in the third limited standard C. Commission staff feel comfortable that these limited standards have addressed the previous concerns of the commission. So today, the staff has the following recommendations. First, the staff recommends the program committee concur with the chair's determination to review the program as a refinement. Second, the staff recommends the chair approve the text amendment without conditions. Since the county has provided an approved ordinance with a vesting date included, staff do not recommend including the condition for approval outlined in the staff report. I'll hand it back to the chair.
Are there any questions or comments about the text amendment? I have one question. When I read this online, I thought the restrictions to buildings that already existed was March 20th, 2026. But your slide said October 2025. It's not a big issue, but maybe I just read it wrong.
So that would have been the recommended condition of approval. And that was the date that the new ordinance was formally adopted by the county. The October 14th date is what was in the ordinance that the commission voted on in December of last year. So the county just decided to retain that same October 14th deadline from the previous version of the ordinance.
Okay, so that's the date we're going with then.
Yes, that's
Okay.
the date that's finalized in their approved ordinance today.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Are there any other questions or comments about the text amendment? So hearing none, we can move on to the vote. Once again, the vote will be to concur with the chair's determination of refinement and approval of the text amendment with conditions.
One correction, there are no conditions. It would just be a straight approval.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right, thanks.
Mhm.
Is there a motion?
So moved, Dan Bryant, Leonardtown.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Commissioner Atherton seconds.
Thank you. Before we move on to the vote, is there any questions or comments? All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Great, thank you. So the last refinement on our agenda is Somerset County text amendment, new RCA use for restaurants and retreats. And this has come before us before as well.
Thank you very much, Chair Bunker. Give me 1 second and get the presentation pulled up. So as you can probably tell, I am not Jamila Sweden. Jamila had a medical situation over the weekend, so she is out this week, so I will be presenting for her. And my name is Charlotte Sharon, by the way, if you didn't know. Give me 1 second. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So hello, my name is Charlotte Sharon. I am the Program Implementation and Education Manager with the Commission. And today I will be presenting on a Somerset County bill that focused on 2 new proposed uses within the resource conservation area. I am joined today by staff from Somerset County who are available to answer any questions. So Somerset County has submitted a text amendment to their critical area program for approval by the commission. A copy of the full ordinance as enacted by the county commissioners it was included as an attachment to the staff report and is also summarized within the staff report. So the ordinance amends Chapter 1-108 of Somerset County's Critical Area Ordinance to allow restaurants and retreats within the Critical Area Resource Conservation Area. And it also addresses limitations and requirements for these uses when they occur within the RCA. So as a note, a portion of this ordinance may be familiar to many of you because last December, the restaurant use was presented to the program committee for information only and to receive feedback from the program committee. During that time, commission staff was also working with the county to revise the proposed text amendment for the retreat use. So the proposal constitutes a new use in the RCA and is therefore a change to the county's critical area program and must be reviewed and approved by the commission. You will see in the staff report and this presentation that commission staff is recommending the committee concur with the chair's determination to process this text amendment as a refinement to the county's critical area program, and that we also recommend approval with conditions. So again, as a reminder, when RCA use text amendments are submitted to the commission for review and approval, the commission should evaluate and the local jurisdiction should show how that proposed RCA use aligns with the purposes, policies, and goals of the critical area law and regulations, as well as the characteristics of how it maintains the characteristics of the RCA. Any proposal for a new use in the RCA must consider that more people and more activity in the critical area can have negative environmental impacts. A fuller list of the policies and goals for the RCA designation can be found on page 2 of the staff report. But in general, it's important to remember that commercial, institutional, and industrial uses are restricted in the RCA in order to preserve its rural and natural character. That said, local jurisdictions are allowed to propose new institutional or commercial uses if the commission approves them and as long as there are restrictions in place to minimize potential impacts. So on December 5th of last year, the proposed restaurant use did come to the program committee for information only. And at that time, staff was also working with the county to provide feedback on the retreat use, which you can see in the letter that is attachment 2 of the staff report. So specific recommendations from the program committee and commission staff they were very similar in the recommendations that were provided to the county. They really mirrored each other almost exactly. But those included vesting provisions to the use, linking the use to existing improved parcel or structure in existence as of a specific date. There were also recommendations related to lot coverage limits, limits on impacts to the critical area buffer and other habitat protection areas, limits on the intensity of the use, including the number of patrons or participants, ensuring that the proposed uses receive all local approvals and authorizations from the county. In the case of the retreat use, submitting an emergency preparedness plan, and then also conducting a climate resilience assessment. So these were this kind of summarizes the feedback that the program committee provided on the restaurant use and that staff provided on the retreat use. So to get into each of these specific proposed uses, the proposed ordinance from Somerset County defines restaurants as any establishment where food and drink are prepared, served, and consumed, and whose design or principal method of operation is characterized by customers being provided with an individual menu and being served their food and drink by a restaurant employee at the same table or counter at which said items are consumed. Furthermore, the amendment defines specific limitations and requirements for when that use is permitted within the RCA. And so Those include limiting the use to structures existing as of December 31st, 2025, prohibiting further impacts to the critical area buffer and habitat protection areas, requiring the completion of a climate resilience assessment, limiting the number of patrons to 75 people or the approved state fire marshal capacity limit, whichever is less, and then also limiting lot coverage to 15% of the lot area, and not permitting a variance for increased lot coverage. Additionally, the use must comply with underlying zoning district requirements and Somerset County Health Department requirements, and is required to obtain Somerset County Technical Advisory Committee and Planning Commission approvals. Each of these limitations are a result of the program committee discussion and feedback that was provided to the county when it came in December. So now onto the retreat use. The proposed ordinance defines a retreat as the use of any land, buildings, structures, and facilities that are operated by a charitable or nonprofit organization, provide opportunities for groups of people to congregate temporarily on a site for enlightenment, contemplation, counseling, renewal, solitude, or educational, recreational, social, or spiritual purposes, provide meals and housing for participants during a period of the retreat or program only, and may provide recreational activities using both indoor and outdoor facilities that contribute to the program experience. So furthermore, the amendment defines, again, specific limitations and requirements for when this use is permitted in the RCA. So the use is limited to improved parcels as of December 31st, 2025. It prohibits further impacts to the critical area buffer and HPAs. It requires the completion of an evacuation plan, including an assessment of coastal hazards. It limits the number of participants to 75 people or the approved state fire marshal capacity, whichever. It limits the number of events to 30 per calendar year, and each event shall not exceed 72 hours. It also limits the use of existing on-site facilities to provide temporary lodging, meals, and recreation solely for participants during the event. And it limits the lot coverage to 15% of the total lot area located within the RCA, and it does not permit a variance to increase lot coverage. Again, this use would also be required to comply with the underlying zoning district requirements and Somerset County Health Department requirements. And it's required to obtain Somerset County Technical Advisory Committee and Planning Commission approvals. So again, each of these limitations are a result of the staff feedback that is outlined in attachment 2 of the staff report. So as stated at the beginning of the presentation, commission staff is recommending that the committee concur with the chair's determination to process the text amendment as a refinement, and we are also recommending approval with conditions. So the conditions outlined on this slide are basically recommending minor revisions to the lot coverage limitations. So for restaurants, we are recommending the bolded underlined language be added because of the potential to have a split parcel designation where you have a portion of the parcel that's designated RCA and a portion of the parcel that could be designated LDA or IDA. In order to comply with COMAR's requirements, the 15% lot coverage limit is only applied to, applied individually to the RCA portion of the lot or parcel, and then the LDA portion of the lot or parcel, or if the other portion is in the IDA, there wouldn't be a lot coverage limit. So we want to make sure that we are limiting it to 15% of just the portion of RCA parcel on the site. And then for the retreat use, again, we're recommending that bolded underlined language be added because we were trying to limit any future potential development that might be associated with the use. So we're recommending 15% of the lot area located within the resource conservation area or 20,000 square feet, whichever is less. And so that is actually to get at the reason that those lot coverage limitations are a little bit different for each of the uses is because the vesting provisions are a little bit different for each of the uses. So for retreats, it's actually limited to an improved vested parcel, whereas restaurants are limited to an existing vested structure. And so because retreats could theoretically construct a structure associated with the retreat use, we wanted to place a limit on how much new development associated with that retreat use could occur. And this 20,000 square feet or 15%, whichever is less, that has been a way that the commission has restricted lot coverage in that type of situation in the past. So that's why we're recommending we do that here. So again, the proposal constitutes 2 new uses in the RCA and is therefore a change to the county's critical area program and must be reviewed and approved by the commission. Commission staff is recommending that the committee concur with the chair's determination to process this text amendment as a refinement to the county's critical area program, and we recommend approval with the conditions discussed on the previous slide. And with that, I will turn it back to Chair Bunker.
Any questions about the refinement? Commissioner McCall?
Thanks, Chair Bunker. I have a question regarding the underlying zoning associated with the retreats portion of this, and I guess really the restaurants too, since that was the part that had come before this committee before. I'm curious what the approach might be. Could other properties and the underlying zoning be changed to allow to make more properties eligible to take advantage of this enhancement? It might be a question for the county.
Yeah, I might ask the county folks to answer that question. So I think what Commissioner McCall is asking is that if a zoning map amendment could be used to change the underlying zoning to allow for use.
The only way we allow rezoning of the county is if there was a mistake in the map or there's a change in the character of the new.
Thanks for that. So I guess maybe I have a follow-up question then. Let's say there was a change in the need for that and somebody wanted to change some of that underlying zoning. Do you have any type of estimate about the number of properties that could be or might be interested in changing that underlying zoning?
We don't have numbers specifically for changing the zoning. Sorry, I'm Jesse Drove, the planning director, by the way. But we do have some numbers for the number of that this would apply to specifically for restaurants. We have a limited GIS capability, but we determined it to be 45 lots for restaurants. This would be applicable to of approximately 17,000 parcels in the county. And for retreats with the zoning that's designated or proposed, it would be 155 of 17,000. So very minimally that this would apply to.
Justin, so does that include parcels that have that underlying zoning and are designated RCI? Okay.
Yes.
Did that answer your question, Commissioner McCall?
It did, thanks. I was trying to just get a handle on, because I know there was the one property on Charlotte's first slide that a lot of the conversation, the first discussion had focused around, and just kind of curious what that potential scale might be. Not saying that all of those 45 or 155 lots in the RCA may go this direction, but I was curious about the potential scale. Thank you.
Any other questions? So I guess I have one. I think the
I was going to say, Chair Bunker, it looks like Commissioner Wilson and Commissioner Gillis both have their hands raised.
Okay, I'm not saying that. Go ahead, Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, I was just gonna, thanks to Commissioner McCall for her comments. Also, thanks to Somerset County staff also for working so diligently with the Critical Area Commission staff. Just one minor, just housekeeping thing. I think the note said that the program committee met December 3rd. We actually, I think, met December 5th. Just, for legal purposes, just make that change if it's no big deal, but thanks.
Commissioner Gillis?
Yeah, real quick, you mentioned earlier, Charlotte, that there was the climate resilience study. What's to be done with the results and by whom?
Yeah, so I think actually that would occur when an applicant applies for the use, like they would be required to perform some type of climate resiliency assessment. But I would defer to the county on like what that would include or what that would look like.
We haven't fully fleshed out exactly what a climate resilience assessment would look like, but we imagine it being a part of their planning commission review. Some of the elements they could address vulnerability to climate change and natural hazards. And I guess it would just be rolled into like their permitting process.
Okay, because I guess one of the things is that we are working on new regulations that deal with climate resiliency, and whatever that study would be, I would assume would have to be related to those new regulations that are going to be put in place, especially on RCA type areas. So it may be something for the staff to consider and how that's going to work out. And make sure you relate that to what the county is trying to get accomplished. And then the second thing, I just had a real quick question, was really on under the retreat. You talked about limiting use for temporary lodging and other things. I'm not sure what if that is that like that you would put up tents that people could sleep in, or I don't understand the what that was trying to get to. Any comments on that?
My understanding is that is so that the lodging that is there for the retreat, like for us, like the specific individual events that that compromise a retreat or compose a retreat use, that lodging is not used like permanently, that people aren't like moving in there on a more permanent basis, that it's really just there for the attendees of the retreat during the time that the retreat is being held. Is that correct, Jesse?
Yes, that's correct. It's just for during the time that the retreat would be in use, not for permanent living at all.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
so that it could be a permanent structure, like it could be a permanent structure that is, it's not a temporary structure in that it's like taken down and put back up. It could be a permanent structure, but it can only be occupied during the actual events of the retreat.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm not seeing hands up, so if anybody has a hand up, please let me know.
I see no other hands raised at the moment.
Okay. I do have a quick question, and this goes back to Commissioner McCall's about underlying zoning. I guess for the restaurant uses, the underlying zoning has to be maritime, residential, and commercial. For the retreat, is there a particular zone that is retreats are restricted to?
Yes, for the zoning for the retreats, it is any of our zoning districts except industrial 1, industrial 2, or our airport zone.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner McCall?
Yeah, and this isn't so much as a question. I just maybe want to pose a comment to the committee, just something that's on my mind. I know over the past several months, we've had a number of kind of these one-off reviews or topics for different uses within the RCA in particular, whether it was for the the care facilities or restaurants and retreats. And I think just kind of that's some of what is on my mind about as we continue to make these slight modifications for one particular jurisdiction, that may be a tool that other jurisdictions may take up and incorporate into their own programs. And I'm kind of just thinking through, is there a different way to think about some of these examples in a more holistic way, so that we're not continuing to kind of pick these off one by one. I don't have a question or a solution to that, but I think it's just something on my mind. If it's 45 restaurant lots in Somerset County, 155 potential retreat locations in Somerset, how many is it if you added that up for all of the coastal critical area jurisdictions, and what would the potential change and impact be from a cumulative impacts perspective? So I just wanted to offer that forward.
Commissioner Gillis, you're on mute. I think you're trying to.
Sorry about that. I agree, Catherine. Some of the things that we're dealing with, we're kind of piecemealing these things, and we're making kind of decisions based on a specific use, but then the regulations open it up to much broader use within that county. But it also does, as Catherine is saying, is opening it up to a broader use across all other jurisdictions. And I think that's an issue that we need to make sure we're not setting precedences that are going to cause us a lot of issues down the line, and also continued kind of piecemealing this and having a lot of these one-off kind of decisions that'll take up a lot of our time.
Chair Fisher, you wanted to join in?
Sure, thank you. And I just want to thank Commissioner McCall for raising the bigger picture issue, and Commissioner Gillis for adding your thoughts as well. This is one that has sort of been frustrating me as well. Not this project, but the idea that these things kind of keep coming up, and we have a couple of tools to deal with them. One of the common threads in a lot of what we've been considering in the program committee over the last year and a half are these grandfathered structures, right? These existing structures. In most cases, that's what we're dealing with. And we have a couple tools for that. One is expand the RCA use list, which is on the table for today. We have growth allocation, which in some ways might fit better, but also could open things up even bigger in different ways. Neither one of those tools seems to be perfectly suited for the kinds of requests that we have been getting. They're the best we've got. But I would be very interested in a conversation, and I would be fully supportive of formal or informal work group conversation to talk about how to handle these things going forward. Because I agree, I think over time, you do create a situation where you may have some unintended consequences. I think it would be, and I don't think anyone's suggesting holding this project to a different standard than the ones that have come recently. But I think going forward, that would be an important conversation for us to have. And I would fully support that.
Great. Any other questions or comments about this refinement? Okay, I guess we're ready for a motion. Okay, so the recommended motion was on the screen. Anyway, it's to concur with the chairman's determination of a refinement and to approve the text amendment with conditions. I think that's the motion. Is that correct? Is what we're looking for?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we needed to actually read the full proposed conditions. So I pulled those up for you in case.
Is there a motion?
Dan Barra, so moved.
Thank you. Second?
Commissioner Hopper.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments about this text amendment? Hearing none, let's move on to the vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you. So the last item on the agenda is information only. This is Worcester County Island Resort Campground growth allocation.
I was muted. Okay, I think we're on. Off to a great start. All right, thank you, Commissioner Bunker. Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Hayden. I am a natural resources planner with the Commission. And today I will be presenting Worcester County's proposed growth allocation at Island Resort Campground. This is being brought to you today for information only. No vote, just information only. And I am joined by Dave Bradford, Deputy Director of Environmental Programs, as well as Brian Soper, Natural Resources Administrator of Environmental Programs, both at Worcester County. And they are here to answer any questions and be part of today's discussions at the end of the presentation. All right, so Island Resort Campground is located in Worcester County and encompasses 2 adjacent properties along Cropper's Island Road that are outlined here in white. The RV campsites are currently on this property right here, and the applicant is looking to expand these sites into this property right here. These are the critical area designations. Most of the properties within the resource conservation area, and a portion of the campground is now within the intensely developed area. And this is due to a mapping mistake that was voted on during the last commission meeting. It was voted on favorably because of this campground was in existence prior to the county's critical area program, and other RV campgrounds in Worcester County are mapped intensely developed area. So that's just as a refresher from last week in case anybody forgot. And the county is today seeking growth allocation at the right here outlined in yellow. And they are seeking growth allocation to reclassify this particular area from resource conservation area to limited development area in order to expand their RV campgrounds by 62 RV campsites. There are also wetlands of special state concern on the site that are outlined here in blue. There are 2 of these wetlands of special state concern are within the growth allocation, the proposed growth allocation area. Okay, this is the close-up of the area proposed for growth allocation. On the right, you can see the proposed 62 campsites, and one of the there's, again, as I mentioned, there's 2 wetlands of special state concern on the property in this growth allocation area. And as noted in the staff report, the proposed campsites over here appear to not be impacting the wetlands of special state concern directly, but the limited disturbance does bleed into their 100-foot buffers, because wetlands of special state concern have 100-foot buffers. So any impacts to wetlands of special state concern or their 100-foot buffers will need to be reviewed and approved by MDE. It is something to keep in mind. Okay, growth allocation must meet certain standards. Those standards are outlined in your staff report and summarized here on the screen. Specifically, a growth allocation must be adjacent to a limited development area or intensely developed area, minimize impacts to habitat protection areas, be located no closer than 300 feet from tidal waters or wetlands in the resource conservation area, and should be located outside of areas vulnerable to climate change. Additionally, Generally, growth allocations proposed in a resource conservation area must not add up to more than about 50% of the county's overall growth allocation available. And a future slide is we'll touch on the county's response to the growth allocation meeting this particular standard here in regards to the minimizing impacts to habitat protection areas. Okay. So in addition to the standards that I just went over, there are certain factors that a jurisdiction must consider when applying for growth allocation, including the growth allocation's consistency with the county's comprehensive plan, policies protecting rare, threatened, or endangered species, any environmental impacts in a coastal hazard area, or impacts associated with wastewater and stormwater management practices, as well as any impacts proposed to underserved or overburdened communities. Other factors to consider include the growth allocation's impact on a priority preservation area. And another factor to consider is if any proposed development part of the growth allocation in that growth allocation area uses existing public infrastructure or is to be served by public wastewater or septic. And later slides will discuss the county's response to the growth allocation's consistency with the comp plan, the environmental impacts associated with the proposed wastewater treatment for the campsite expansion, and impacts on priority preservation areas. Okie dokie. So as previously noted, one of the standards for growth allocation is to locate the growth allocation area in a way that minimizes impacts to habitat protection areas. Wetlands of special state concern, or WSSC for short, are a habitat protection area with high ecological value that are designated for special protection under the state's non-tidal wetlands regulations. Wetlands of special state concern, I've already said this before, any impacts to wetlands of special state concern or the 100-foot buffers are regulated by MDE. One of the WSSCs on the site harbors 2 state-listed endangered plant species, and as previously noted, the growth allocation area includes 2 of these wetlands of special state concerns. And while the development for those 62 campsites, again, don't impact the wetlands of special state concerns directly, it does look like it will, the limited disturbance will bleed into the 100-foot buffers. The entire forested area on the site is recognized as Forest Interior Dwelling Species Habitat, or FIDS habitat for short. FIDS habitat is also a type of habitat protection area, and any disturbance to FIDS habitat needs to follow our Commission's FIDS guidance. The project currently proposes to clear about 2.8 acres of FIDS habitat around this wetland, and specifically clearing FIDS edge habitat, and any clearing to FIDS edge habitat will require mitigation in the form of at a ratio of 1:1 for the square footage of the forest cleared in that edge habitat, and mitigation has to be met in the form of creating FIDS habitat either on site or off site. There we go. In the staff report, we noted that mitigation for the FIDS clearing was proposed on site. Since the staff report, we have discovered that the proposed mitigation area, circled here in red, is actually part of a timber harvest plan and cannot be used to meet the mitigation requirements. So the applicant will need to meet mitigation for the clearing in FIDS somewhere else on site or off site. Moving on, recall that a factor that growth allocation should consider is environmental impacts associated with wastewater and stormwater management practices and wastewater and stormwater discharges. So in 2022, the property owner received conditional approval by the county for a water and sewer plan amendment that basically outlined the water and sewer needs for that 62 campsite expansion. Basically, the wastewater from the proposed campsites will be conveyed to an existing on-site packaged wastewater treatment plant, which will be expanded to accommodate those increased flows from the 62 sites. And then the treated wastewater is proposed to be spray irrigated onto approximately 15 acres of agricultural fields on site adjacent to wetlands. It is our understanding that this water and sewer plan amendment has not yet been approved by MDE. Okay. Lastly, recall that two factors that should be considered for growth allocation is the growth allocation's consistency with the jurisdiction's comprehensive plan and impacts on priority preservation areas. As noted in the staff report, a 2023 memo from Worcester County staff to Worcester County Planning Commission states that the growth allocation is not consistent with the county's comprehensive plan and would not implement the goals and objectives of that plan. The same memo also recognizes that the growth allocation is within a priority preservation area and states that the growth allocation is not compatible with the priority preservation area policies. The memo argues that the growth allocation is not consistent with the comp plan or the priority preservation area policies because the campground is a legally existing non-conforming use. And the property was granted a special exception in January 2008 by the Worcester County Board of Zoning Appeals to expand that existing campground. So that's sort of the argument that's being made for why it's not consistent with the comp plan and why it doesn't meet the priority preservation area. Okay. Now, given everything that we've discussed, we have a list of questions provided in your staff report and shown here on this slide to kick off our discussion today. Again, this growth allocation is being brought to you for information only. There's no vote happening here, just information only. We want to have a helpful discussion. And we have some guided questions here. And one of the first questions here is, does the growth allocation as proposed minimize impacts to habitat protection areas? Just to recap, right now, FIDS clearing is proposed, which will need to be mitigated for through the creation of FIDS habitat, either on-site or somewhere else off-site. And there appear to be proposed disturbances within the 100-foot buffer of the wetlands of special state concern. So impacts to those wetlands and their buffers will need to be reviewed and approved by MDE. Another question for our discussion today, does the proposed wastewater treatment provided minimize environmental impacts, including impacts to water quality? As of right now, the plan is to spray irrigate the treated wastewater from the 62 sites to an agricultural field on site adjacent to wetlands. And it's our understanding that this water and sewer plan amendment that encapsulates that plan has not yet been approved by MDE. And also, given the approval for the water and sewer plan amendment was 2002, it would be helpful if the county could speak to whether the water and sewer capacity is still available for the project. And these last two questions for our discussion today. Given that the growth allocation is not consistent with the county's comprehensive plan and the priority preservation area designation, according to the 2023 county staff memo, it would be helpful if county staff could provide more information to our commissioners on this and perhaps some more background that was not captured in that 2023 memo. So with all of that, I will now hand it over to Chair Bunker to kick off our discussion. And if anybody, if it's crickets, I'm gonna start asking everybody what their thoughts are on these questions. So, Commissioner Bunker.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Wilson, you're going to lead it off.
Well, yeah, actually, I have a litany of comments on this one. So, if the county wants to answer 3 and 4, maybe I'll let them do that, or people have shorter questions before I, discuss this parcel and the proposal.
Yeah, Brian, Dave, if you want to speak on the, because I know that you provided me with some information regarding the county's response to the comp plan and the priority preservation area. I don't know if you want to just chat about those briefly for the commissioners. That would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. We can get some additional information here. I think one thing that we didn't mention was 2024, the property was rezoned to A2, which no longer really using non-conformity isn't an issue. That's not really a term now that is being rezoned to A2. Also, as far as the PPA and also the comp plan, just so everyone understands, the PPA is located within the comp plan. So they're two items, but they're one of each other. So, staff report was September of 23, and then the project went before the Plan Commission later that same year. So the Plan Commission is kind of like the overseeing hierarchy of the comp plan and kind of makes the determination. So through their thorough review, they determined that the project was consistent with the comp plan. And then, it actually went forward with the county commissioners that approved the request. I think it was January of 24. So just for perspective, the comp plan and the PPA was approved by the Plan Commission and then subsequently by the county commissioners. Does that kind of answer 3 and 4 for you, Dave?
Thanks for your comments, David. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Wilson, did you have other comments?
Yeah, I had multiple comments on this parcel. I don't really concur with the Planning Commission's notion that this was consistent with a comp plan. I was heavily involved in the 2006 comp plan and the rezoning in 2008 and 9. I think the A2 was where the Planning Commission made it A2 because it was a non-conformity based on a relic of the old A1 zoning. And so if you look at the current comp plan as it is, I would say that this is not consistent with the Worcester County comp plan, and it's just a relic of the old A1 zoning. Just a couple things about this parcel. I know this, having lived here 30 years and being the breeding bird atlas coordinator and the reptile and amphibian atlas coordinator for the county. There's a really beautiful ridge line of xeric dunes, which is why this is probably a wetland of special state concern, because there's these wetlands surrounded by this sort of dune line, multiple dune lines that are called xeric dunes that have rare plant communities in them, and thus you have the rare plants there that basically run. In this case, on the coastal bays, there's one dune line that runs from south of Berlin down to the Maryland line. And I do think there's an old record of tiger salamander, extremely rare species on this site as well. I think it's worth noting, you mentioned the FIDs, the wetlands of special state concern, but this is also a priority preservation area for the county in the comp plan. It's a targeted ecological area for the state. It's part of the Habitat Community Network, and it's part of green infrastructure. It's also listed on the Biodiversity Conservation Network as well as a parcel of concern, which is obviously a concern for me. I would say that, per the mapping, there are storm surge issues with this parcel and where it is as well. I'm curious about the spray irrigation that is right on Newport Bay, which has the lowest water quality of all the 5 embayments in the coastal bays and right on a trib of Newport Bay. And the site is also contiguous to 500 acres of protected land that are to its north. And so this is an area, part of the rural legacy area, just on the northern end of that for Worcester County. I'm curious about the pond that the new RVs are supposed to be around. I thought that was a Carolina Bay, but maybe it was a borrow pit. I know the ones to the south and east are borrow pits, but I just want to make sure that wasn't a Carolina Bay or a forested wetland that was converted to a permanent pond. And maybe Dave Bradford knows the answer to that, but I thought that that was not a borrow pit. I'm just curious about that, if you know the answer to that. So yeah, so those are my comments on this site. I can't imagine voting for this kind of growth allocation, but that's up to the commissioners.
Thanks, Commissioner Wilson. Any other comments or questions? Chair Fisher?
Thank you, Chair Bunger. And thank you to the county. I know Mr. Bradford needs to be here regardless, but thank you for coming. I see a few other hands from the committee, so I'll just ask one question and then defer and then circle back if the rest are otherwise answered. Can we talk in a little bit more specifics about the wastewater treatment and the status of that? It looks from the staff report like the capacity of the plant needs to be expanded to accommodate the development. Part one of the question is that what the water and sewer amendment is for? But then building off of that, because of the water quality issues in Newport Bay, there is a nitrogen or a nutrient TMDL. I'm wondering about the treatment level associated with this facility. So Mr. Bradford or someone else, if you could speak to what kind of nutrient treatment this is getting before it goes on the field, and then what the expectations are after it runs through the field, and then what any capacity expansion may mean for an upgrade or additional nutrient loading.
Yeah, sure. We can speak a little bit to that. Actually talking yesterday in advance with our director that oversees particularly the wastewater side. So the current system that's in place is functioning as is permitted through MDE. They have a rather complex and, strict reporting requirements with MDE for the spray site, and the monitoring on sites require water monitoring. So as far as the upgrades for the sites, so once the capacity reaches, I believe it's 80%, currently I believe they're around 40 to 50%. I'm talking to our director. Once they approach like 80%, that's what's going to be required of additional flow requirement, additional, flow to the spray irrigation from the current sites. As far as actual like computations on the nutrients of the spray site, and we can get that. We don't have that on hand, but we can certainly get that for you. But yeah, that was pretty much the basic summary on what's going to be required for the new plant. But yeah, the staff report as far as like requiring the upgrade for the additional flow, that's more or less when it gets to that 80% threshold. And currently they're well below what their allocated permit from MDE required right now. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yep, I think we're halfway there, Dave. Appreciate that. So if someone could just follow up with the nutrient removal capacity prior to application, and then any expected nutrient loads post land application, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gillis, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I just appreciate the information here, but I have some concerns as well in terms of, I think the conversation last time we struggled with accepting the mapping issue and the impact that that this would have in that area, and how that conformed with what we were trying to do within the RCA. This additional requirement it seems to really stretch beyond some of the boundaries of what we had considered prior to this. But I guess a couple of questions. Katie, you had put up there some of the requirements, and it included public access to public water and sewage. I think there it is. Uses existing public infrastructure if it's served by public wastewater or septic. I guess so. We're saying that it is existing septic system now, a private septic system that would just have to be expanded. Is that our understanding? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's my understanding is that it's all going, there's a package wastewater treatment on site. And it's going to be expanded, but Dave could probably speak more on that one.
Okay, how about water? Now we're talking about wastewater, but what about the what about water supply for this campground now and in the future?
Dave, could you answer that?
It's all private. Everything on this way is private, water, private sewer.
So it's all well water then?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's required to be tested. All these campgrounds and whatnot, all their community water systems have to be tested to make sure it's safe for drinking, of course.
Okay, and so if we're going to increase the water treatment requirements, are there other buildings or other disturbances that are going to be required to support that increased, in addition to the area where the septic would be, spray would go? Are there other pumping and other things that need to be included in that, and where would those be located?
Yeah, so this project's been going on since 22, so I was just refreshing my brain before the meeting. So within the 33-acre growth allocation of that area, 10.2 acres is actually what's going to be the LOD. And out of that 10.2 acres, we're looking at around 4 acres of lot coverage. So other than the force main that's going to be leaving pretty much where Katie's cursor is, heading southeast along the existing road, and then the spray site, of course, is across the pond. So all that will be tied into existing infrastructure. So other than the pipeline that leads the proposed expansion to the existing campground is going to be the sort of the leads for the water sewer runs. So does that kind of answer your question on that?
I understand.
Yep.
And then the last thing, just for in my view, the commissioner's consideration is really if there are a number of things that are MDE that are waiting for MDE approval. I would think that we would, I personally would like to see where that is going and the issues that MDE may have before we really consider this even further or make suggestions of how we can mitigate things, because I think it really hinges on a lot of this on MDE's determination. And then we could start to look at things like other issues with growth allocation.
Well, we can certainly, we can certainly reach out. Our county actually handles the water sewer for the county, the same department. So we can certainly reach out to our counterparts at MDE to see the procedural hoops are a little bit challenging, whether you get the growth allocation first or the water sewer amendment second. We've kind of ran through this the entire 3 or 4 years now, the chicken and egg, which one comes first. So we can certainly, follow up and talk to them as far as procedure wise, which one's the best route. But it's been challenging to kind of figure out which one goes first. I know it's kind of convoluted, but we've been kind of running through it ourselves.
Yeah, and along with this, I really, and what Dave has questioned really comes to a head as well, and that's the consideration for the critical area that is probably the most important. But obviously, the sewer treatment is going to be an even, I think, a bigger piece of this puzzle. So, thanks for your information.
Commissioner McCall, I think you're up next.
Thanks. This discussion's been really helpful. I have something similar. Just I'm curious if before the county considers moving it forward for an official submission, I am also curious about MDE's feedback, particularly around the wetlands of special state concern and how they may respond to that. And I understand that would be part of a growth allocation request, because I think particularly with wetlands of special state concern, some of the things that Dave mentioned regarding the nature of the wetland habitat and the fact that it is FIDS habitat. Once you start fragmenting that, it's not just impacting things that are on site. It does have kind of that, again, larger impact to the landscape. The other thing I am curious about and have on mind is some notes that some of the information about this species is somewhat dated. There was notes about a 2007 site visit, and then a more recent 2021 Wildlife and Heritage Service review. So that's something I'll probably be following up with my colleagues about at DNR. And then I'm just curious, I know, and I don't think I missed this, but correct me if I'm wrong. The status of the mitigation site, I know that there was a discussion that the portion that was previously identified can't be utilized because it is currently part of a timber harvest. I'm curious what the status is of an alternate site that would be identified, preferably on-site or off-site. That's my, I think one question that I had is the status of that mitigation requirement.
We just found out so within a week since setting out the staff report and since going through the mitigation a little bit further, that's where we found out, we literally just found out about the timber harvest plan. So we've only just informed the county, hey, you guys are going to need to look for another mitigation site. So we haven't really, I don't think the county has had any chance to jump on finding new locations yet. But Dave and Brian, if you have, let me know. But I know that I just sent you guys an email about this a few days ago.
Thanks, Kate. I think I missed that. I was thinking that was a known fact before last week when they were notified. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sorry. The staff report says where the mitigation was the mitigation was being proposed, how the mitigation was being proposed, but didn't say where, because we didn't quite have that information just yet. We were just okay, this is what they're proposing. But then since proposing the staff report, we got a little bit more information. We're wait a second. So we're working on that.
Commissioner Cornwall?
Thanks. Just a couple of follow-up questions. Katie, you mentioned, and it's probably, I know it's a concept plan, but the impacts to the wetlands of special state concern, the buffer. Do we know, would they be permanent impacts or are they temporary impacts? Because if we're having all of these additional campsites put in, there's still going to be additional activity. That 100-foot buffer could be impacted more depending upon the site location, and so I'm just curious of whether it's a temporary or permanent impacts.
Yeah, I'll let Brian, Dave talk about that. It looked like when we were zooming in, it looked like it was kind of it looked like it was encroaching. Bits of the limits of disturbance were encroaching, and I don't know if that was this is what we have. So Dave and Brian, I don't know if you can speak on that exactly. It was just some areas, and we also don't know if the wetlands of special state concern changed since the Wildlife and Heritage Service letter was from 2021. So there's that to consider as well. But Dave and Brian, I don't know if you can speak on I think are these just these are the lots. So if it was encroaching in the 100-foot buffer, it would be gravel.
Yeah, I was looking through the 22 report from their engineer. So they have a letter in here from DNR, Wildlife and Heritage, about the wetland state of concern, and they actually broke it up in the southern portion and northern portion. So apparently the northern portion wasn't of concern. The southern portion might have been more concerned. But as far as the wetland impacts, what I was reading through the report was there was only going to be a 5,220 square feet temporary impact to non-tidal buffer. So we would need to peel back the layers to see exactly where this impact you're speaking of is in the sediment stormwater plans. I don't recall that being in the report, so we'd have to. I was only aware of the 5,000 square foot temporary non-tidal wetland buffer impact. We would need to look at that a little bit closer if that's something that's been brought up.
Okay. I've got two quick follow-ups, I guess. For the priority preservation area, I will note that the county is currently drafting their updated comp plan. We've actually reviewed the draft and comments are coming back to the county, I guess in the next few weeks or within the next month. I will note that in the proposed comprehensive plan update, the county is actually expanding their priority preservation area. So I'm just curious, how have you looked at the comparison of or is there anything, I guess, in the comp plan update that supports this project versus the existing comp plan? But not sure if you've looked at it for that kind of a comparison. And that would be the question to county staff. Sorry, Katie, I'm sure you haven't seen the comp plan update.
I actually have seen the comp plan update and provided comments on it, but I'm gonna
Okay.
I'm gonna let Dave and Brian speak on that one.
Sorry, we can look into it. I don't recall exactly the area. It's a big update. I can't recall exactly what this area was calling for. But we can certainly look into that and see what if there was any modifications to this area.
And then just my last one is, Katie, I know one of the considerations are impacts from the climate change. And I would also like to see a little bit more information on that as well.
Gotcha, thank you. We can definitely get more information on that from climate impacts. I think when we were talking about this with the county, we were recognizing that because these are campsites and it's gravel, there's no like permanent structures being kind of put in here. We weren't, our staff weren't terribly too alarmed by the idea, but we can get more information on that or request some more information on that.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
Hey, Katie, the only thing I would also say, you're saying they're gravel. An awful lot of campground upgrades these days are going beyond gravel for concrete pads. Just wanting to make sure that, you know, those design considerations are considered when we're looking at this.
Thank you. Brian and Dave, do you actually know if I just assumed this was gravel? I thought I saw in the report. Is it gravel or is it paved, the sites?
Yeah, they would be gravel. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
the majority of the site is, gravel
Okay.
already. So
Thank you.
Commissioner Richards, I think you're up next.
Thanks. Just to kind of follow up on that last comment about climate data as it relates to this site, I'd be particularly interested in hydric soils and marsh migration corridors, particularly as it relates to the spray effluent proposal, and then also the campsites. There's just an awful lot of marsh and must be a lot of hydric soil existing in this area. So just interested to know how that will impact kind of, I know we don't perk test spray irrigation fields, but I'd be interested to know how that will contribute.
We can definitely request that.
Chair Fisher?
Thank you, Steve. Observation and then a couple of questions. First, it would probably be helpful for staff to clarify the applicability of the climate provision to this project, because I know it has been in the works for a while, and I think there may be some exemptions involved. So, Katie or Charlotte, could you speak to exactly what is applicable to this particular project?
Charlotte, I can take a stab, and if I'm way off field, just let me know. Based on, and this was also provided in the staff report. So actually it was a couple of years ago that this growth allocation has been through a couple of critical area planners. I am the fourth. So back a couple planners before me, there was this discussion, and this was well before we even had the climate change standard. And back then, the growth allocation had not been officially submitted to our office, but there was a kind of handshake agreement that we wouldn't be writing the now that's once it is officially submitted to us, because we've been in discussion about this for years, that there was a handshake agreement that we would not be holding them to this new standard, the climate change standard. That's not to say that we can't ask for more information, and that but like I said, we'll collect more information on this, provide it to the commissioners. But I don't believe, and Charlotte, correct me if I'm wrong, because this was reviewed by like so many planners before, that we're not going to necessarily hold them against their responses to that one. But I don't know if that helps answer the question. And Charlotte, again, tell me if I'm way off field here.
Yeah, so there is some history with this is around the climate and the equity piece. I think there was also a local approval prior to the date that
Yes.
This would have become effective, but Mr. Kelly, I see you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Fisher. I want to read the applicability because I think it might be a little bit more clear and provide a little bit more clarity than what Katie was providing. But so the growth allocation was approved by the commissioners on January 16th, 2024. That was 8 months before House Bill 233 was passed or was enacted in October 2024. The county kind of followed up with staff guidance to pursue that mapping mistake that we got approved for the 37.7 acres of RCA to IDA to be consistent. That didn't get approved until last month. So because of the initial timing of the commissioner's local approval and that subsequent request of the mapping mistake, the climate equity considerations were determined to be inapplicable to this growth allocation. So it's really about the process and these approvals that had come on in the past. That's why we're here today with this applicability. Not being inapplicable, being inapplicable to growth allocation. Sorry.
Yeah. And I have, thank you, Nick. I have a little bit more. I see a hand from Mr. Cropper. Steve, if you would like to entertain any comments he has on that piece of it specifically, and then I have a couple more questions.
Commissioner Cropper?
I think you're muted, Mr.
How
Cropper.
about now?
There you go.
Okay. One, thank you for allowing me to be heard very, very briefly. I just want to address the comp plan issue. This campground was a legal use as originally approved. And when the Worcester County Commissioners adopted their most recent comprehensive zoning map in 2009, as well as updates to the zoning code, a campground was no longer a permitted use in the A1 zone, only the A2 zone, which is why the property was rezoned to A2 to avoid it being considered a non-conforming use. So in order to rezone it, it had to be proven that the rezoning was consistent with the county's comprehensive plan. This growth allocation also went to the Planning Commission and then the county commissioners. And both the Planning Commission and commissioners found the growth allocation to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I just wanted to address that issue that was discussed earlier. Both the Planning Commission and the commissioners consistently found the rezoning and the growth allocation consistent with the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands
Yes,
raised.
if I could indulge.
Sure.
Just a little bit longer. Thank you, Mr. Cropper, for that piece of it. So I think we have a little bit of clarity on the applicability of the climate and the equity. I think that's not to say that many of the considerations that might fall under that aren't still relevant. I think Commissioner Richards' questions about hydric soils gets at the idea of potential pollution transport throughout the site being facilitated by the soil conditions and things like that. We do have a coastal hazard standard that's been in effect for a long time that I will ask a question about in just a moment. That doesn't necessarily allow us to look into the future, but it does allow us to look at and charges us, frankly, with looking at the present risks associated with storms and things like that. So some of these considerations, I think, are weaved throughout the standards and the factors that are applicable to this project. So my final two questions for today. The first one does get back to the idea of these wetlands of special state concern and the RTEs. We have a standard that requires us to minimize impacts to HPAs and optimize benefits to water quality. So I wholeheartedly endorse the comments earlier in this meeting about getting MDE's input. I think that we're always seeking expert views. I would also say that what they come back with should not be determinative of the commission determination related to the impacts on the HPAs, because our job specifically, we're looking at something slightly different than what MDE is looking at, right? They're looking specifically at allowable impacts to that specific feature. We're looking to minimize impacts to HPAs as a whole and optimize water quality. So our question is whether an LDA is appropriate for this site, given the preponderance of the HPAs on the site. So I, for one, would love to see what MDE comes back with. I think it can inform our deliberations. I don't think it should necessarily determine what we say on this site related to the wetlands of special state concern. Also interested in anything else that Wildlife and Heritage can provide on that one. Related to that, so is stormwater, because one way of defining an impact to a wetland is whether your LOD actually infringes upon the wetland or its buffer. But even if you don't, doesn't mean there are impacts to that wetland. And stormwater would be one area, stormwater runoff, where that could absolutely occur. And I think that's well within the purview of this committee to consider. So it doesn't look to me like we have that level of detail at the moment, but I would be very interested in the stormwater design for this site and where that water is going and what kind of treatment is being provided before it hits any wetlands on the site. So that's one thing. If there's any information on that, I do see a hand from Dave Bradford on that. And then I'll finish up with a question about coastal hazards.
Yeah, so we do have the stormwater plans and we do have the ESD spreadsheet that shows all their BMPs we're utilizing. So we can certainly, I don't know if Kate, if you have it, it's part of the 112-page report they submitted a while back. But it does break out the stormwater BMPs, what they're using for treatment, and where they're meeting their ESD requirements.
Yeah, I don't know if it maps it out. I might just ask you to like highlight the areas like on the map. It might just give like a description or something. I might ask you to call it out where it is in the report, Dave, if that is okay.
This is Brian. All that information was submitted in the report. I think there's the map that goes along with it. I can't remember the exact number. Related to Chairman Fisher's question about the coastal hazards, the site where they, while the growth allocation may be within the 500-year or the 0.02% chance floodplain, the proposed lots are outside of they're in the X zone for the current firm map for floodplain.
Okay, that's helpful information. Do we know related to like present day storm surge risk? Has anyone run that?
Maybe category 2.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think so when I looked a while ago, but don't hold me to that number. I believe it's 2.
Okay. So if the understanding that most of the use is fairly mobile, right? A lot of it will be on wheels. Can anyone sort of speak to what might be left behind in a category 2 situation? What are the risks to the environment associated with a coastal flood from a hurricane on this site? Do we have, would the treatment plant itself be vulnerable? Are there storage tanks with hazardous materials? Is there significant construction that could become mobile in a flood with velocity?
I mean, typically with there's 2 or 3 other waterfront campgrounds in the county, and typically when they go through like an evacuation process, all the on-site systems are shut down as far as the actual like dumps per se for RV sites are all closed off. The system's more or less shut down, so you don't have a risk of running salt water through the system. Same thing goes for the wells and the water supplies. Like I said, there's 2 or 3 other campgrounds in the county that probably have a higher risk than this one as far as the storm damage or storm flooding.
Okay. Okay, Chair Bunker, I have exhausted my list of questions for today.
I think Nick has a comment or question.
Sure, thanks, Chair Bunker. I just wanted to make sure, I feel like Commissioner Wilson may have had some questions, and I just want to make sure that he felt his questions were addressed. I remember particularly one I think was about maybe like whether it was an actual pond or if it was something else. I just wanted to make sure he had all of his questions sort of answered. So I wanted to circle back to him.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, my questions were addressed, put it that way. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you. Other than that, no, if there are no further questions, I did have a summary of, I think, items to maybe have provided, but I'll hold those until we know all questions are asked.
Commissioner Super, I think has.
Yeah, Brian Soper from Worcester.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Nick, I didn't want to interrupt you there. I'm looking at I'm using the MarylandFloodMaps.net. Just when we're discussing some of the coastal hazards, again, where the campground would be, where the proposed lots would be located, it doesn't really show them with any kind of inundation or vulnerability until the 5 to 10 foot inundation level. Just for that information for everybody.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Brian.
So I have a question. The use of off-road, are ATVs or mountain bikes allowed off-road on the Highland Resort Campground? The reason I'm asking the question is these new sites are going to be located sort of intertwined with some very sensitive areas. And I can see a lot of conflict if ATVs and our mountain bikes are allowed to sort of roam all over the property owned by the resort.
No, I mean, the existing campground itself, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's limited to just strictly like golf cart type thing on, improved roadways or gravel roadways. So there's no like off-roading, those type of things that are part of the existing campgrounds. I wouldn't see why they would be part of the expansion either,
Okay. Yeah. It's just something that's very difficult. If people bring their ATVs, it's very hard to control. They'll go wherever they want to go. That's one of my concerns. Nick, I think you were going to kind of summarize what you've heard so far.
Yes, so I think based on what I have gathered, and if there are things that are missing, please, any commissioner can raise their hand, but seems to me that some of the outstanding questions that the county and the campground owner would need to provide is, one, have to find a location for mitigation based on the understanding of this area being part of a timber harvest plan, the first proposed location. 2, additional information from MDE on wastewater, sort of where it's going, as well as the impacts on potential habitat protection areas. Providing the stormwater design for the site and the ESD design for the site. Seems like we're requesting an update. I think Commissioner McCall mentioned this, but I believe based on the date, I think we would need an updated letter from Wildlife and Heritage Service on rare, threatened, and endangered species. Also, probably a delineation or better understanding to be sure that the wetlands of special state concern are still in the same locations. Better to make sure that we can identify where those WSSCs are and impacts associated with those wetlands of special state concerns. And then I think if I got from Commissioner Cornwell, additional information about the priority preservation area, that's going to be part of the updated comp plan, and how this project is supports or how it sort of aligns with the updates to the expansion of that priority preservation area. That's the list I have. I don't know if there are other things that I missed.
Did we also get Chair Fisher's comment on nutrients from the treatment?
I think I have that under the wastewater and impacts on HPAs. Yeah.
Sorry, yep.
But yes, you're right, Katie, but I think that's sort of where I have that.
Yep, thank you, Katie. I think it's all wrapped up in there.
Commissioner Huffer?
Yes, was there any open item relating to the buffer impact? I don't know if that was clarified, 'cause it was about stone but is that clear as far as this impact on the buffer? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that Commissioner Hubbard. Yep. I don't think we were entirely clear about the extent of impacts to the wetland buffer. It sounds like there may be something in the report that they are temporary and about 5,000 square feet, but we do need to look into that, verify, make sure that's the complete answer.
Yep,
Yeah.
thank you. I added that.
Yeah, I don't think the report really spoke on it. It was when we were looking at the pictures that we were like, well, it looks like it actually, you can see where it's overlapping areas where it's slightly there's an overlap. The LOD is overlapping that 100 foot buffer. So I don't know if it's actually spelled out in the report. It's just what we were seeing on the visuals.
Yeah, we'll send you that section. I think they mentioned specifically not impacting the 300 or 100 foot buffer. It was just a limited, temporary impact to non-total wetland buffer.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, so this has been a great discussion. Is there any other comments or questions? So Nick, can you tell us what the next step is?
So I think the next step, since this is information only, there does not need to be any sort of vote or anything today. This was more for a chance for the county to have an opportunity to get feedback and to find out if additional information is needed. So I think the next step would be for the county to coordinate with Katie and Susan in our office with this information. And we'll kind of work with the county from there to see where we go before this comes back to the commission for consideration.
Okay. So last chance for comments or questions. Thanks, everybody. It's been a really interesting meeting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So hearing no more comments or questions, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.